You're listening to the Resilient Author Podcast, the show that goes beyond the pages to explore the grit, courage, and resilience it takes to write and publish a book. I'm your host, Carrie Human, and each week I sit down with authors to uncover the stories behind their stories, the challenges they faced, the breakthroughs they experienced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Whether you're working on your first chapter or celebrating your launch, this is the place to find inspiration and practical takeaways for your own author journey. Let's dive in. So Michelle, for those who may not know you yet, I know you have a few books, but can you speak just a little bit about what your newest book is about and what you hope the reader takes away from it?
Sure. Yeah, it actually doesn't even feel new anymore. We're within 3 years of it being launch day, 3 years past. But what's new is the audiobooks are out right now. And these two books came out as a twin, my most recent books, meaning they launched on the same day. And any potential author out there, I would highly recommend doing books one at a time. Twins is it's a lot more work. But the books are supporting a spouse or supporting someone who's lost a spouse or partner to suicide, or surviving spouse or partner suicide loss. Those are the two different books. And the surviving spouse or partner suicide loss book was born after my husband died by suicide. And a couple of years after that, I realized that I could help people who were in my similar situation to just get through it with a little more ease, if that's possible. And then once I finished that manuscript, I started the next one as a companion book, the supporting a survivor of spouse or partner suicide loss, because what I realized was that people really need education. Nobody really knows what to do to make you feel better or just to be with you in your grief. And ultimately, no one can make you feel better, but there are ways that they can make you feel worse. So that second book came from my urge to educate people so that they'll know what to do when they know someone who lost their spouse or partner to suicide.
We're going to dive in much deeper. But yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned make you feel worse because, obviously when someone is in a situation like that, people do try to comfort, but to your point, a lot of times it ends up sort of backfiring. So it is really good that you have a book out there to educate people. So you mentioned this, Michelle, but your book deals with one of the hardest experiences a person can face. Obviously the loss of a spouse or a partner to suicide. When you first, started working on this book, how did you actually navigate telling a story, rooted in so much pain while still being able to hold space for yourself?
It's a great question. And I would say poorly. It was it was very, very difficult. I never wanted to write a book. This was one of those otherworldly experiences. The day that I spread Glenn's ashes in the ocean off of Maui, which was one of our favorite places, I got a message from the universe. Call it God's voice, call it my higher self. I can't presume to know what that voice came from, but it was a voice saying you need to write a book about your experiences. And I rejected that outright. So this is April of 2017, right? A year after Glenn died. And I spent the next 6 years really trying to find my way to get to writing this book. And what I realized was I needed a lot of help. So I've been a writer all my life, but once I got over the abject rejection of the voice, I dabbled it with a couple book coaches to try to figure out how to make sense or a plan or an outline or anything. And then I ended up with a book coach who really took me from A to Z and all the way through the publishing process, because she has a publishing company also. And that's how I did it. It took a long time, a lot of years and a lot of tears. part of going through the pain, though, writing my story was incredibly healing. And most of what I wrote isn't in the book. Most of it was really just for my own therapy. And maybe if I write a memoir someday, I will put the deep pain in there. But
Mm,
because these books were for people already in pain, I was very limited in the amount of detail I added because I didn't want to re traumatize the readers. They're already going through enough.
yeah, absolutely. Writing a book, as you know, can change you as much as it can change your reader. How would you say writing the book has, shaped you personally? Your perspective, your confidence, or just even your sense of purpose at this point?
Oh my gosh. Your questions are amazing. Really,
Thank you.
really good questions.
Mm,
Shaped me. Well, I have to say, it did give me a lot of confidence.
mm,
During the book writing process, no, I had no confidence.
mm,
But once I got that manuscript handed in and I started seeing the drafts, and I mean, the editor's notes were not really great for my confidence, but why we pay the people who know everything about English,
mm,
um, and just the whole process of the production, and then that first moment where you open that box and you're holding this book in your hand. I mean, when I just you really it's such a sense of accomplishment. I did it. I wrote a book. It's published and it's in my hands. And there's a lot of FOMO, there's a lot of nerves, FOMO, like imposter syndrome, not FOMO.
mm,
Uh it- Thinking, "Oh, I'm not an author," even though I knew I was a good writer.
mm,
But who's going to read this? How's it? And what I had to go back to, this is sort of the spiritual aspect of it, was just my faith that the book is written for the people who will read it. And even if it only helps one person, that's kind of the mantra I kept using for
mm,
throughout the process. Even if this book helps one person have one easier day, it's worth it.
mm,
And that's what got me through it. And it turns out it's helped more than one person.
It's helped a lot more than one person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. So I did a little homework. Obviously we've known each other a bit before the interview, but you've been quoted. You said that part of your mission is to create more grief literacy in our culture and help people talk about loss more openly. Can you talk about what grief literacy actually looks like and how can we start building it, at home, in the workplace, or even just in our own language?
Yes, excellent. And that's kind of my crusade, honestly. We need to normalize grief and especially suicide.
Mm,
People even people who just know someone who died by suicide, not necessarily someone close or haven't had suicidal thoughts themselves, can feel such deep shame around the topic.
mm,
And when we feel shame, we bury things, right? We don't want to, to get rid of shame, you have to bring it out into the light. And this is one way that I think social media has been incredibly helpful. There are people on social media who are just matter of fact and open about their experience with suicide attempts, their
mm,
experience with suicide loss. And so it's normalizing those conversations. Now, not everyone's searching suicide loss on social media. So it's it's in the workplace, it's in my yoga studio, it's in all of the places that I may come across people to be able to say the word suicide. And I have to tell you, it's been almost 10 years since Glenn died. And the subject, and it may be that I'm kind of more in it than I was, but I really feel like people are much more open about talking about it. There were people I've met along my path that can't even say the word.
mm,
So it's normalizing it, it's having conversations about it, it's showing up for my appearances, my keynotes, my workshops, all the things that I do, my writing. It's showing up and showing people, hey, I have a great life. I have a joyful life even after this horrible tragedy happened, and how I did it. I talked about it. I got the right therapies. I met the right people. and it's possible. So that's kind of my crusade. Even when I'm just teaching corporate wellness,
Mm,
I'll talk about grief. There's no wrong way to grieve. Grief doesn't necessarily mean you lost a human.
mm,
People think grief equals, somebody died, but that's not necessarily true. And when we talk about grief as part of our everyday experience, we realize that anything can cause grief. I mean, I dropped my favorite mug the other day, and it's not a big deal, but I honestly felt what I would describe to you as grief. It
mm,
was a loss, and any loss, a job loss, loss of a friend, a relationship, anything can
mm.
start the grieving process. So as long as we're educated about it and kind to ourselves, we can get through the process with a lot less pain.
Yeah. What it sounds to me like you're describing is sort of a paradigm shift, and I'm just curious. Do you feel like 2020 had anything to do with this reset of people being more open? Like, what do you think has sort of made it so that people are more open about talking about suicide and grief in general? I mean, we're not there yet, but it's gotten
Yeah.
a lot
No,
better.
it has. And as you know, it was a big year for suicide, 2020.
Yeah.
Um, take a breath on that. um, that's an example. Right now, I was feeling some pain,
Mm,
for mostly compassion for the people so much lost that year and years following. And so I took a breath and I checked in with myself, and now I can go on. That's one of the ways that we can help ourselves when we're grieving is feel those feelings, feel them, nurture them, and then we can move forward. I think 2020 skyrocketed conversation about grief. I think it
mm,
was huge. And it's because every person grieved something they lost that year.
mm,
We all lost freedom. We lost maybe a sense of safety. If people weren't worried about pandemics before, they sure were then. Um, our medical system seemed to just kind of buckle, and I know doctors and nurses and everyone was doing their best, but it was unprecedented and almost impossible until we learned more about the disease to even treat it.
mm.
So, especially at the beginning, so many people were lost and people were stuck at home. I mean, they lost their outdoor, whatever they were doing outside the house, their gathering places, all of these things. So yeah, I think it absolutely skyrocketed our conversation.
Yeah, yeah, that was a wild time. It's kind of yeah, it blows my mind that that was 5 years ago. So much has happened. So much has happened.
So
Um,
much.
mm.
I
So
mean,
Michelle,
5 years ago, right now, I don't know when the podcast is coming out, but we're recording in late October
mhm,
2025. People were just talking about vaccines at this point. No one had gotten any.
yeah,
Remember that? I mean, it's hard to
yeah,
remember.
it is. I mean, life was
We were
so
locked
different.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Depending on
severely
where
like
you
that.
where you were. I mean, there were definitely places that didn't lock down, but most of the world.
Yeah, most of the world. We were locked down. I was in Seattle at the time. I imagine you were in Oregon, but yeah, we were locked down for sure. Mm, yeah, wow. So, Michelle, you often talk about helping people move from surviving to thriving. What does because you hear thriving a lot. You hear that word a lot. What does thriving
Mm.
actually mean to you now? After everything you've experienced and built at this point.
Well, I have to tell you, it's a lot quieter than the old image of thriving was. I can very much prioritize my time.
Mm,
For me personally, my thriving is my freedom to make choices, to do what I feel supports my health and well-being, and to say no to the things that do not support my health and well-being. And that's
mm,
something that I teach on a daily basis, to set boundaries, to say no, we're all so overscheduled and so overstressed. I try not to be. I'm not saying it never happens. because our world is so demanding and so fast paced. And sometimes we schedule appearances back to back, um, even when we try to avoid it. Um, but it's sometimes I have that control and I
Mm,
get to choose and I have the mindfulness to stop and take a breath and say, yes, this is something that will bring me joy, or no, this is something that is not going to support my well being, mental, physical, spiritual, social, whatever type of well being. And that to me is thriving. It's not that, okay, I didn't, run my 5 miles and lift my 20 minutes of heavy weights and, this big long list. Everything just happens organically now. And it's all a matter of, is this good for me? Is
mm,
it going to help me be healthy and strong so that I can serve my community? Or is this going to drain my energy and make it so I'm not able to be as present and effective for the people that I'm helping?
mm, mm. Yeah, thriving. It sounds like grace to me. It sounds like taking a
Mhm.
breath. Like you said, it sounds much slower than it used to, but yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
it's everything you need. That's great.
Yeah. Thriving does not equal busyness or numbers of appointments or numbers of clients or numbers of, miles flown anymore. That's
Mm,
not at all what thriving to me used to be sort of this success, like this list of things, you know. But I think if we can just be aware of helping others is my particular, soul work in
mm,
in the grief and suicide loss areas. So I need to keep myself really healthy to be able to do those things. Because even with all my practices in place, it's still a hard place to be. To be a grief coach is very challenging.
mm. I've had the opportunity to speak to a few different grief coaches at this point, and I'm just curious for you, being in this space, being on the front line. Obviously, everyone's coming to this, from different places, different stories, but what do you feel is sort of a older way of thinking in this space that you'd like to see sort of eradicated? What's something you'd like to see more people doing less of?
Well, what comes to mind right off the top of my head is I would like people to be more thoughtful in their speech,
Mm,
more mindful in their words
mm,
and actions. Because when people have been through trauma, especially the trauma of suicide, there are certain words and actions that can be very difficult, very activating. For
mm,
example, I use the word activating rather than triggered. So my husband died by gun violence, and many people have lost many people to gun violence. The word triggered doesn't do us any favors.
mm,
I used to have a visceral reaction, physical response when someone used that word.
mm,
So activated. I like activated better anyway because once the trigger's pulled, there's no going back, right?
mm,
If you're activated, you use your tools to deactivate.
mm,
So I think that kind of thing, people drag their finger across their throat or they put their finger up to the side of their head without thinking about the person that they're talking to may have some background they don't know about.
mm,
So I think that as much as it's important to have the higher level, open, frank conversations, that we can also be very much more careful with the words and gestures that we use, being mindful that we don't know what the person that we're talking to has been through.
mm. I'm really glad you mentioned that. I hear a lot of people saying, that was insane, that was crazy. And to your point, if someone has a background of a family member or, a loved one
Mhm.
who's, gone through, mental hospitals, that can be extremely, extremely triggering. So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
People talk about suicide all the time. And unless you have a heightened awareness of it, you wouldn't even notice. I mean, just the other day, my friend's like, I'm so mad at my son. I am going to kill myself. She said that to
Mhm.
me. And
Wow.
that's a friend of mine.
Yeah, she should know better.
Like,
Goodness.
there's
Yeah.
and even though, like I said, I've had all this experience and growth and developed all this strength and resilience, when people threaten to kill themselves, it still gets me cringy really
Mm-hmm.
badly. I just wish people would find a different way than, talking about self-harm. It needs to be gone. We
Mm-hmm.
need to not be saying that.
Yeah, I agree. Another one is like they committed suicide. I've noticed you said died by suicide. Have you noticed sort of the
Yes.
distinction there too?
Yes, thank you for that.
Mm,
That's on my soapbox crusade as well. And that
mm,
is committed is often the way we use it is you commit a crime, right?
mhm,
People who die by suicide aren't necessarily guilty of a crime. They
mm,
probably had a mental illness, an addiction, a combination. There's a lot of reasons why people die by suicide. But when we say commit, it has that connotation that they are bad and wrong.
mm,
And it we of course the loved ones who are left think it was wrong and wish they hadn't done it, but that doesn't make them a bad person. It means their pain was so strong they could not see a way forward, so they had to exit. So that's
mm,
that's why died by, died of. I've also heard
mm.
um, completed is another one that I hear a lot in the
Huh.
suicide community. I don't love that one,
Mm,
but it's more inclusive as far as people who have attempted, right?
mm. When you say completed, would you be open to just like using it in a sentence? I'm not even sure how you would use that.
My husband completed suicide in
Ah,
2016,
I see.
and then rather than attempted.
Mm,
But yeah, like I said, that's not something I don't use that. I'm not comfortable with that. But that's another thing that we need to do with our grief education and grief awareness is find terminology that we're comfortable with that isn't offensive or harmful to others. And that's
mm.
tricky. I'm a work in progress myself with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. Same here. So does your book go into things like that? I know there's two different versions. There's one for the individual and then there's one for couples or for families. Are you sort of coaching them? Are you sharing some of these I guess you would say mindsets around dealing with grief?
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely. Yeah. There's a whole big QA in the back. All the most common questions that I get or that I had when I was going through my early stages of grief after losing Glenn.
mm,
Um, and there's a whole list of say this rather than this,
mm,
do this
mm,
rather than this, and list of how to find help,
mm,
how to get the support you need. There's so much support out there. And, when I wrote those books, I think 988 was brand new, or maybe it wasn't even started yet. But in the US, I don't know about other countries, but in the US, we have 988 now. And that
mm,
is a line dedicated specifically for people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts, or they have a friend or family member who is, and they want to know how to help them.
mm. Yeah, because you said you wrote the book 3 years ago, and that was shortly after 2020, so around 2022, maybe 2021 when that started.
Well, they were published in 2023. I was writing since 2018, really. It
Mm,
just took me so long because, like you were mentioning, writing through the pain, it was so difficult to write,
mm.
especially at first, that I had to take a lot of cry breaks, and sometimes the breaks lasted for months.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely hear you. I'm gonna take a breath, take a page out of your book. So Michelle, resilience, it shows up differently for everyone. Sometimes it's discipline, sometimes it's faith, and for some people, sometimes it's just stubbornness. Um, what what would you say has helped you just to keep going, when the process got tough or uncertain as you were getting your book out and, sharing your story?
Yeah, great question. Again, um,
Thank you.
I think probably a lot of it was my education and following my spiritual journey with learning from people like Pema Chodron, Eckhart Tolle, Jack
Mm.
Kornfield, mindfulness learning. I just this year finished a 2-year mindfulness meditation teacher training. Um,
So,
it is awesome. So it's finding the resources, mostly through books, because I love to read books or listening to books for me and my therapist, of course, to be able to keep moving through the difficult times. I call it sitting in the suck. So a lot of times we don't want to sit in the suck. We don't want to feel the feelings, right? I was a big drinker, and I was self-soothing through the use of substances because I couldn't handle the pain.
mm,
And then, you know, a little over 2 years after Glenn died, I stopped drinking.
mm,
That was the last of my substances that I used. And um, partly because my therapist said, you're not going to heal. You're not, I had PTSD. This is, the more substances you use, the longer it's going to take. And
mm,
I decided to follow her instructions. It took me a long time, a lot of months and a lot of stops and starts, but to the point where when I was feeling the feelings, I had a place to go instead of,
mm,
oh my God, I have to go get some tequila or I have to go get high in some other way. It became, I have my breath, I have my physical, I did the somatic therapy where you
mm,
feel your body and you reground and you self-soothe. And then once I got to that point, also the other two big things were accepting myself.
mm,
I am still a valuable, loving, worthwhile human being, even though my husband died by suicide.
mm,
Accepting myself and releasing that shame was probably the most difficult thing.
mm,
I mean, other than missing him and wishing he was alive, of course. And then the other thing that kind of piggybacks on that is studying and practicing self compassion.
mm,
So, first of all, accepting, and second of all, loving myself no matter what.
mm,
And that's, every appearance I make, every talk I give, uh, every coaching session, I always end with be nice to yourself.
mm,
You know, you could, if the way we speak to ourselves, we would never speak to a friend that way. Probably never speak to an enemy that way. We're so mean to ourselves. So if we could transform that into being our biggest fan,
mm,
it's magical. And there's no outward difference, right? You're
mm.
not hurting anybody. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a mindset shift that makes all the difference.
Mm. That really resonates, and I want to ask you because I feel like this is something that has come up for me in some different conversations, and my wife and I talk about this too. But there's kind of this fine line between like feeling your feelings, whatever you're going through, feeling your feelings, and then on the other side of that, some people may call it toxic positivity. There's a lot of different words for it,
Mm-hmm.
but are you able to kind of speak to kind of the distinction between like actually feeling what you're feeling and then allowing yourself like if you feel what you feel, do you sort of gradually kind of get back over to the bright side, or do you think there's value in maybe not feeling what you're feeling and just saying I'm fine, just trusting that whatever it is you're not feeling will go away and you'll just feel fine?
I do. And another really great question. And to that, I will say that's when we need to be in touch with our bodies. We need to be in touch with all levels of us. Can I be with this? Can I be with this right now?
Mm,
And if you can't, then you go do something else. You go for a run, talk to your spouse. You put on, for me, it's cat videos. I love funny cat videos because right now is not the time to be feeling all these big feelings. I can't be with it right now.
mm,
And then I do my somatic, experience exercises. I do the breathing, I do the grounding. Maybe I listen to a meditation. Can I be with this?
Mm.
And the answer is usually yes. The motivation behind the being with this is that's how we grow through challenges. That's how we make it out into our strongest, most resilient self. If we just say, no, I'm fine, you're not growing. You're not doing the work that it takes to become your strongest, most resilient self. Not to say that's not wrong sometimes. I mean, if you're at a party and you start to have some feelings and there's 50 people around and you can't get out of there and go have a good cry, punch a pillow. I'm really fond of that kind of expression. Just do it carefully so you don't hurt your hand. Um, then maybe it is okay to shove it down.
Mm.
I don't consider that toxic positivity. I consider that managing the situation. It's not always a great time or place to just sob,
Mm.
but do it later to get it out because it's important to get there. We call it in my grief education uh, community, we called it toxic bright siding.
Mm. Mm.
And so that's a little different because that's you doing it to someone else. Like, Carrie, you come to me and you say, I am just blown away today. I'm so sad. I cannot get over this sadness today. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. And all the wrong things that people say. He's in a better place, all of that cringy stuff. Usually people say those things because they're uncomfortable with your sadness.
Mhm.
And I do talk about that in my books. And so you do the work, but maybe not in front of them.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. And
Toxic
don't
bright
toxic
siding.
bright side. Don't
Mm.
toxic bright side people.
Mm.
It's not okay. Don't say, oh, it's okay. It's not okay. It sucks. But
Mhm.
most people can't sit in the suck with you because they have their own feelings they haven't, processed and grown through. So you got to find people. Grief coaches are great. They've been in the suck. They know what it's like, and they're not going to toxic bright side you.
Mm. That's really powerful, Michelle. It almost seems like that would be a worthwhile sort of mandatory piece of education for us all to get, before we get out of high school, just knowing how to communicate with people when they're going through a darker time.
Yeah. You can't
Mm.
fix someone. You just have
Mm.
to wait till they build their resilience. And just knowing that, yeah,
Mm.
you're right. I wish mindfulness was taught in the schools. That would be absolutely brilliant. The Dalai Lama says that if we taught every 9-year-old in the world to meditate, we would have peace within a generation.
Mm. Imagine that. Mm. So a lot of listeners of this podcast right now, Michelle, have a story of their own. They've been carrying it for months, in some cases, maybe even years, but they haven't started yet for whatever reason. If you could say one thing to a listener who may have an idea, but they haven't started, maybe they feel stuck, maybe they're afraid. Um, what's one piece of advice you could maybe share to get them sort of in the game, in the arena?
Just start talking or writing. I know your talking is what a great way to do it for people who aren't writers. For me, I always journaled. I wrote my feelings from as soon as I was old enough to write pages
Mm.
and pages and pages to process my feelings. Same thing can be done with voice, like with your program. Just get it out,
Mm.
move it. If it's stuck in there, any way you can. Maybe you're musical, so sing it. I love how people put different lyrics to old tunes. You could try that,
Mm.
become a lyricist, but just move it however you can. I love the idea of talking into your voice notes as a way to do it. It's like talks therapy, but you don't have to share it with anyone. And then once you get some of it out, then, maybe worry about turning into a book or not. But I have to tell you that I wrote thousands and thousands of words before I ended up with the few that are in my books. Uh, and it was therapeutic, but it got the ball rolling. It's like
Mm,
unplugging the drain. Just get it moving out of you however you can. And cry and scream and throw pillows and dance and run and, make it a physical experience as well. It's really hard to sit still writing or talking when you're having big feelings. So let them go.
mm.
Let it move.
Let it move, let it go. I love it. I
That's
love it.
right.
So this is kind of a new segment. You're actually my first guest that I'm going to sort of take through this lightning round. But I have 4 questions. You don't have to think too hard about them, but I'll just ask and you can
Oh my
answer them the best way you can. Hey, I figured you'd be the perfect person to sort of open this up. So thank you
I'll
for
do my
volunteering.
best.
All right. So what's one book that has changed your life?
Uh, oh my gosh. Eckhart Tolle's book about presence that I can't think of
Oh,
it.
Power of Now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Power of Now. Thank you. Yeah. Power of Now, life changing.
That
Also
is,
Seat of the Soul. I have to give Gary Zukav his props as well. That was incredibly life changing for me. Yeah.
yeah, that's where it all started for me. Great books. I kind of know this answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. When it comes to expressing ideas, are you more of a writer or a talker?
Oh yeah. It depends. I mean, both. I can't pick one or the other. I love to do things like this and make appearances, but uh I'm much more thoughtful in my writing than my speech. Working on it.
You're doing great. You're doing great. Um, One word that sums up your author journey.
Expansion.
Hmm. Finish this sentence. Writing my book taught me to.
Taught me healing is possible. Taught me to share my story to help others.
Hmm.
Sorry, I got more than one answer for all these questions.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. So this is the final chapter of the episode. If you could leave one piece of advice or encouragement for our listeners, something they'll carry long after this episode, what would it be?
It would be nice to yourself.
Mm,
You are perfect the way you are. You are a perfect expression of you. There's
yeah.
only one of you in the world. Be you and be nice to you. Treat you like you would treat your best friend.
Mm. Such a great reminder. Michelle, this was a lot of fun. Before we wrap up, where can people find your books and follow your journey?
Well, my books are everywhere. I do have an Amazon author page that's usually the easiest. And the audiobooks, like I said, they just came out in September of 2025. I'm so excited they're
Congratulations.
finally out. Thank
Mm,
you. That was a long journey. Um, my website is inhabitjoy.com and I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. I try to avoid Facebook, but I do have a page on there. So I'm pretty easy to find.
mm. Excellent. Well, Michelle, this was really a treat. I really appreciate you holding space for us today and sharing your story. This was great. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie. I love the work you're doing. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into the Resilient Author Podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you both inspiration and practical tools for your own journey. If you've been carrying the idea for a book, but haven't started, or you started and feel stuck, I'd love to invite you to join my 5-day Speak Your Book Challenge. In just 5 days, you'll speak the outline of your first draft and discover how to turn it into a finished manuscript and a published book. You can join anytime at voicetobook.co/challenge. Until next time, keep going, stay resilient, and remember, your story matters.